I never thought garbage collection would become the defining battle of my adult life. But then again, I never expected to live in Meadowbrook Hills, Texas, where a middle-aged woman named Patricia would make it her personal mission to ruin my existence over trash day timing. My name is Wesley Jenkins, and I am a 32-year-old software engineer who works from home. I moved into this pristine suburban neighborhood just outside Austin 6 months ago, drawn by the promise of peace, quiet, and a place where I could finally focus on building my startup without the distractions of apartment living. The house was perfect, a modest 3-bedroom ranch with a decent backyard and a 2-car garage. Everything seemed ideal until I met Patricia Henderson, the self-appointed queen of the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association. The trouble started on a Thursday morning in late September. I had put my trash bins out Wednesday evening around 7, just like I had been doing since I moved in. The garbage truck usually came sometime between 6 and 8 in the morning, so putting them out the night before seemed logical. I was in the middle of a video call with a potential investor when my doorbell rang insistently. Not just once, but 5 times in rapid succession, followed by aggressive knocking. I excused myself from the call and opened the door to find Patricia standing there with a clipboard. Her blonde bob perfectly styled despite the early hour, wearing a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her thin lips were pressed into a disapproving line, and her blue eyes blazed with righteous indignation. "Mr. Jenkins," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "I need to speak with you about a serious violation." I blinked at her, confused. A violation of what? She thrust the clipboard toward me, nearly hitting me in the chest. Section 12. Paragraph 4 of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA covenants clearly states that trash receptacles may not be placed at the curb before 6 a.m. on collection day. You have repeatedly violated this rule. I stared at the document she was showing me, trying to process what I was hearing. "You are telling me I cannot put my trash out the night before?" "That is exactly what I am telling you," Patricia snapped. "Your bins were observed at the curb at 7:15 p.m. yesterday evening. That is nearly 12 hours early. It is unsightly, it attracts pests, and it reflects poorly on our community standards." I felt my frustration building. "Patricia, the garbage truck comes early. If I wait until 6 a.m., I might miss it entirely because I work from home and I am usually in meetings or deep in code by then. This seems like a ridiculous rule." Her eyes narrowed dangerously. "Are you calling the rules of this community ridiculous, Mr. Jenkins? Rules that every other homeowner manages to follow without complaint. I am saying that this particular rule does not make practical sense," I replied, trying to keep my voice level. "And I have not seen anyone else getting harassed about when they put their trash out." "Harassed?" Patricia's voice rose an octave. "I am performing my duties as HOA president, which includes ensuring compliance with our community standards. You are receiving a formal warning, and if I observe this violation again, you will be fined $250. She tore off a copy of the citation and shoved it into my hand before turning on her heel and marching back to her oversized SUV parked in my driveway. I stood there holding the paper, absolutely stunned. A $250 fine for putting trash out 12 hours early. This was insane. I went back to my meeting, but I could barely concentrate. After wrapping up the call, I spent the next hour reading through the entire HOA covenant document. Sure enough, buried in the dense legal language, there it was. Trash receptacles could only be placed at the curb between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. on collection day, and had to be removed by 8 p.m. the same day. The fine structure was equally absurd. First violation was a warning, second was $250, third was $500, and it escalated from there. For the next 3 weeks, I grudgingly complied. I set alarms for 5:45 a.m. every Thursday, dragged myself out of bed, and took my trash bins to the curb in the pre-dawn darkness. It was miserable. I was not a morning person by nature, and disrupting my sleep schedule for this nonsense was affecting my work. I was groggy during morning meetings, my code had more bugs than usual, and my productivity tanked. Then came the morning that changed everything. It was mid-October, and I had a critical product demo scheduled with a major potential client at 9 a.m. I had worked until 3 in the morning getting everything ready, finally crashed into bed, and completely forgot to set my trash alarm. I woke up at 8:30 to my phone buzzing with a reminder about the meeting. In a panic, I rushed through my morning routine, got my laptop set up, and barely made the call on time. The demo went well, but it was not until noon that I realized my trash bins were still in the garage. I debated what to do. The garbage truck had obviously already come and gone. I could wait another week, but my trash was getting pretty full. I decided to just leave it until next week and made a mental note to set a backup alarm, but Patricia noticed. Of course she noticed. She must have been monitoring my house specifically because at 2 p.m. my doorbell rang again. This time when I opened it, she was holding her phone up, showing me a time-stamped photo of my empty curb. "Failure to present trash receptacles on collection day," she announced triumphantly. "Section 12, paragraph 6. That is a $250 fine, Mr. Jenkins." I felt my temper flare. "You cannot be serious. I forgot. It happens. I will take care of it next week." "Ignorance of the rules is not an excuse," Patricia said primly. "The fine will be added to your monthly HOA dues. Have a good day." She left before I could respond. I slammed the door harder than necessary and immediately started researching HOA laws in Texas. What I found was not encouraging. HOAs in Texas have broad enforcement powers, and unless their rules are discriminatory or violate state law, homeowners have limited recourse. I could fight the fine in small claims court, but that would cost me time and money, and there was no guarantee I would win. I paid the fine, seething with resentment. $250 for forgetting to take out my trash. It was extortion, plain and simple. But I told myself to let it go, to just be more careful, to not give Patricia any more ammunition. Then came the incident that pushed me over the edge. 3 weeks later, on a cold November morning, I dutifully put my trash out at 5:55 a.m. I checked my watch to make sure it was after 6, waited those 5 minutes specifically to comply with the letter of the law, and placed my bins at the curb. I went back inside, made coffee, and was settling in to start my workday when my phone buzzed with an email notification at 7:45 a.m. It was from Patricia, CC'd to the entire HOA board. The subject line read, "Repeat violation Jenkins property." My heart sank as I opened it. She had attached another photo, this one time stamped at 5:53 a.m., showing what appeared to be my bins at the curb. The email outlined how I had repeatedly violated the 6 a.m. rule and was demonstrating a pattern of disregard for community standards. She was issuing another $250 fine. I immediately pulled up the footage from my Ring doorbell camera and checked the timestamp. I had clear video evidence showing me placing the bins at the curb at 5:55 a.m., not 5:53. Patricia had either manipulated the timestamp on her photo or her clock was wrong, and she was using it to find me anyway. I drafted a response email, attaching my video evidence and politely pointing out the discrepancy. I explained that according to my time-stamped video footage, I had complied with the rule and requested that the fine be waived. Patricia's response came within an hour. She claimed that her photo was accurate, that video timestamps could be manipulated, and that regardless, 5:55 was still technically early since it took me approximately 2 minutes to place both bins at the curb, meaning I had started the process before 6 a.m. Therefore, the fine stood. I was so angry I had to step away from my computer and go for a walk. This was not about rules or community standards. This was personal. Patricia had decided she did not like me for some reason, and she was using her position as HOA president to make my life difficult. When I got back from my walk, I found another email from her, this one informing me that I had until 8 p.m. to remove my trash bins from the curb, and that failure to do so would result in an additional fine. I checked the time. It was 1 p.m. The garbage truck had come at 7:30 that morning. My bins were empty, but apparently leaving them at the curb after collection, even though they were empty and it was still business hours, was also a violation. Something snapped inside me. I had tried to be reasonable. I had tried to follow the rules, no matter how absurd. I had paid fines I did not deserve, but Patricia was going to fine me no matter what I did. So if I was going to get fined anyway, I might as well make it worth it. I went back inside and read section 12, paragraph 4 again, very carefully. Trash receptacles may not be placed at the curb before 6 a.m. on collection day. Before 6 a.m. Not at 6 a.m. Before 6 a.m., which meant that at 6 a.m. or any time after I was in full compliance. And technically, 2 a.m. was on collection day since the collection day started at midnight. As long as I put the trash out at 2 a.m. or later, I was not putting it out before 6 a.m. on collection day, in the absolute technical sense, even though the obvious intent of the rule was to prevent bins from being out overnight. It was malicious compliance at its finest, and I was absolutely going to do it. More importantly, I was going to do it in a way that would make Patricia's life as inconvenient as mine had become. The following Wednesday night, I set my alarm for 1:55 a.m. When it went off, I dragged myself out of bed, got dressed, and at exactly 2 a.m. I wheeled my trash bins out to the curb. But I did not do it quietly. I made sure to let the bins roll across every crack in the driveway. The wheels rattled and clattered in the silent suburban night. I took my time positioning them, letting them bang against each other a few times as I adjusted their placement. Then I went back to bed. Thursday morning, my phone started buzzing at 6:30 a.m. Text messages, emails, and even a voicemail from Patricia, all demanding to know why I had been making noise outside at 2 in the morning. I waited until 9 a.m. to respond, keeping my message brief and professional. Good morning, Patricia. I placed my trash receptacles at the curb at 2 a.m., which is on collection day and therefore not before 6 a.m. on collection day as prohibited by Section 12, Paragraph 4. I ensured compliance with all HOA regulations. Best regards, Wesley Jenkins. My phone rang 30 seconds later. I let it go to voicemail. Patricia's message was barely coherent, a spluttering mix of accusations and threats. She claimed I was violating noise ordinances, disturbing the peace, and that she would have me fined for this behavior. I did my research. Meadowbrook Hills had no specific noise ordinance that prevented homeowners from using their own driveways at any hour. The City of Austin's noise ordinance did prohibit unreasonably loud sounds after 10 p.m. in residential areas, but wheeling trash bins across my own driveway did not qualify as unreasonably loud by any legal standard. I was not playing music. not running power tools, not shouting. I was performing routine household tasks on my own property. The next morning, Friday, I received a formal letter from the HOA, delivered by certified mail. It claimed I was creating a nuisance and demanded I cease placing trash at the curb at unreasonable hours. I responded with my own formal letter, drafted with the help of a lawyer friend, pointing out that I was in full compliance with Section 12, Paragraph 4, and that no HOA rule specified what hours I could use my own driveway for routine household tasks. That weekend, I received a revised notice claiming that the spirit of the rule was to prevent bins from being out overnight, and that my 2 a.m. placement violated that spirit. My lawyer friend assured me that HOA rules had to be enforced based on their actual language, not on some vague notion of spirit. If the HOA wanted to prevent overnight placement, they needed to revise their rules to explicitly say so, which would require a vote of the entire HOA board and possibly the homeowners. The following Wednesday night, I did it again. 2 a.m., trash bins to the curb, making sure the wheels created their distinctive rattling sound. This time, I noticed lights turning on in Patricia's house across the street. She lived directly opposite me, which I had not really registered before. No wonder she was so focused on my property. She had a front row seat. Thursday morning brought an emergency HOA board meeting notice. The agenda had one item: discussion of nuisance behavior by homeowner at 847 Maple Drive. That was my address. I showed up to the meeting at the community center that evening, armed with my binder of documentation, printouts of all the emails, the HOA covenant with relevant sections highlighted, my Ring camera footage, and legal research on HOA enforcement and Texas property law. The meeting room was surprisingly full. Apparently word had spread about the dispute, and several neighbors had come to watch the drama unfold. The HOA board consisted of Patricia as president, a man named Douglas Thompson as vice president, a woman named Linda Chen as treasurer, and 2 at-large members, Rachel Fitzgerald and Thomas Moore. Patricia called the meeting to order and immediately launched into a dramatic recounting of how I had been terrorizing the neighborhood with my middle-of-the-night garbage activities. She made it sound like I was out there every night banging drums and setting off fireworks. When she finally finished, Douglas cleared his throat. "Mr. Jenkins, would you like to respond?" I stood up, keeping my voice calm and professional. "Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to explain my perspective. 6 weeks ago, I received a warning from Patricia for placing my trash bins at the curb at 7 p.m. the evening before collection day. I was told this violated the rule that bins cannot be placed out before 6 a.m. on collection day. I complied for several weeks, setting early alarms to place my bins out after 6 a.m. I pulled out the documentation of my fines. However, I was then fined $250 for forgetting to place my bins out at all 1 week. Then I was fined again when Patricia claimed I had placed them out at 5:53 a.m., even though my time-stamped video footage clearly shows I placed them at 5:55 a.m. Patricia disputed this and claimed I had started the process before 6 a.m., so the fine stood. I could see a few board members shifting uncomfortably. I realized that no matter what I did, I was going to be fined, so I decided to ensure absolute compliance with the rule as written. Section 12, Paragraph 4 states that bins cannot be placed out before 6 a.m. on collection day. It does not say they cannot be placed out after midnight on collection day. 2 a.m. is on collection day and it is not before 6 a.m. Therefore, I am in full compliance. Patricia's face was turning red. That is deliberately misconstruing the rule, is it? I asked. Because the rule does not say what you claim it says. If the HOA wanted to prohibit overnight placement, the rule should say bins cannot be placed out before 6 a.m. and after 8 p.m. the previous day, or something to that effect. But it does not say that. It says before 6 a.m. on collection day. Linda, the treasurer, spoke up. Wesley makes a valid point about the language, but surely placing bins out at 2 in the morning is excessive. I agree it is not ideal, I said, but I work from home and my schedule is unpredictable. Sometimes I am up working at odd hours anyway. 2 a.m. ensures I do not forget, and it ensures I am in compliance with the rule as written. If the board wants to modify the rule to be more specific, I am happy to comply with a revised rule. But I should not be fined for following the current rule. Douglas looked at Patricia. Did you really fine him based on a 2-minute discrepancy? Patricia bristled. He was technically in violation. A 2-minute discrepancy that might have been a clock synchronization issue, Rachel, one of the at-large members, said. That seems harsh, Patricia. The meeting devolved into a debate among the board members. It became clear that Patricia had not fully briefed them on the situation, and several of them were uncomfortable with how aggressively she had been pursuing fines against me. Thomas, the other at-large member, pointed out that I had paid $500 in fines over what amounted to minor timing issues, and that seemed disproportionate. Finally, Douglas suggested a compromise. What if we table this discussion and form a committee to review Section 12 and propose clearer language? In the meantime, Wesley, could you agree to place your bins out at a more reasonable hour, perhaps 5 a.m.? I considered this. If the board will agree to waive the fines I have already paid, yes. Otherwise, I will continue to exercise my right to use my own property as I see fit, in full compliance with the current rules. Patricia looked like she was going to explode. Absolutely not. He does not get to blackmail the HOA. It is not blackmail, I said calmly. It is asking for fairness. I was fined $500 for violations that were either unavoidable or based on questionable enforcement. I am asking for those fines to be returned, and in exchange, I will work with the board to find a reasonable solution. Linda looked at the financial records. We can refund the fines. We have the budget for it. After another 20 minutes of heated discussion, the board voted. 3 members, Douglas, Linda, and Rachel, voted to refund my fines and form a rules review committee. Patricia and Thomas voted against it. The motion passed. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Patricia was furious that the board had sided with me, and she was not about to let this go. Over the next 2 weeks, I received citations for the most absurd violations imaginable. My grass was supposedly a 1/4 inch too long. There were unapproved decorative elements in my front yard, which turned out to be a perfectly ordinary welcome mat. My house numbers were allegedly not the correct font according to HOA guidelines. Each citation came with threatened fines if I did not remedy the violations immediately. I documented everything and forwarded it all to Douglas and the other board members. It was clear Patricia was harassing me, but here is where Patricia made her critical mistake. In her determination to find violations, she started trespassing on my property. I came home from a rare trip to the grocery store one Tuesday afternoon to find Patricia in my backyard, taking photos of my fence with her phone. My privacy fence, which I had not even installed but which had been there when I bought the house. "What are you doing in my backyard?" I called out, pulling out my own phone to record. She jumped, startled, then tried to recover her composure. "I am conducting an inspection for HOA compliance." "You are trespassing," I said firmly. This is my private property and you do not have permission to be back here. You need to leave now. As HOA president, I have the right to inspect properties for violations, Patricia said, but she was moving toward the gate. No, you do not, I replied. HOA rules allow for inspection of front yards and areas visible from the street or common areas. You have no right to enter my backyard without my permission. Please leave before I call the police. She left, but not before taking a few more photos. The next day, I received a citation claiming my fence was 6 inches too tall according to HOA regulations. I measured the fence. It was exactly 6 feet tall, which was the maximum height allowed. I took photos with a measuring tape clearly visible and sent them to the board. But Patricia's backyard invasion had given me an idea. I checked my Ring camera footage from that day and previous days. Sure enough, this was not the first time she had been in my backyard. Over the previous 2 weeks, she had entered my property at least 4 times, always when I was not home. I called a lawyer, not my friend who had helped with the letters, but an actual property attorney. I explained the situation, showed him the footage, and asked what my options were. He told me that Patricia's repeated trespassing could be grounds for a restraining order and potentially a civil suit for harassment. He also suggested I file a police report to create an official record. I went to the Austin Police Department and filed a report about the trespassing. The officer who took my statement was sympathetic, but explained that since Patricia had not damaged anything or stolen anything, it would likely be treated as a civil matter. However, he did go to Patricia's house and gave her a formal warning that she could be arrested for trespassing if she entered my property again without permission. Patricia's response was to call an emergency HOA board meeting to discuss false accusations against board members. I was ready. The meeting was packed. It seemed like half the neighborhood had shown up. Patricia stood up and launched into a speech about how I was trying to undermine the HOA and make her look bad because I did not want to follow the rules. She painted herself as a victim, claiming I was harassing her and threatening her with false police reports. When it was my turn to speak, I brought my laptop and connected it to the projector. I would like to show everyone why I filed a police report. I played the footage from my Ring cameras. There was Patricia, clear as day, entering my backyard gate on 4 separate occasions. The timestamps showed she always came when my car was not in the driveway. On one occasion, she tried to look through my back windows. The room went dead silent. Several people looked shocked. Patricia's face went pale, then bright red. "That is not trespassing," she stammered. "I was doing my job. I was checking for violations. HOA rules do not permit board members to enter private backyards without permission," Douglas said quietly, pulling up the HOA bylaws on his tablet. "This is clearly stated in Section 3. Inspections are limited to areas visible from the street or common areas." Linda was shaking her head. "Patricia, what were you thinking?" "I was trying to maintain community standards." Patricia's voice was rising. "Wesley has been nothing but trouble since he moved in, and none of you seem to care." "He has been following the rules," Rachel said. "Annoyingly, perhaps, but legally. You have been the one overstepping." The meeting ended with a motion to remove Patricia from her position as HOA president. It passed 4-1, with only Patricia voting against it. Douglas was appointed interim president, and a special election was scheduled for the following month. I thought surely this was the end. Patricia had been removed from power. I could go back to my normal life, put my trash out at a reasonable hour and forget this whole mess. But Patricia was not done. Not by a long shot. 2 days after her removal, I found all 4 of my tires slashed. There was no note, no obvious evidence, but I knew. I called the police and filed another report. They said without proof, there was nothing they could do. I filed a claim with my insurance, paid the deductible, and got new tires. 3 days later, someone spray-painted trash across my garage door in red paint. Again, no proof, but the message was clear. The police took another report. I installed additional security cameras covering every angle of my property. Then I got a notice from the city claiming my property was in violation of multiple zoning codes. The complaints were anonymous, but they were detailed and oddly specific, focusing on minor issues like the height of my mailbox post and the placement of my air conditioning unit. I had to take time off work to meet with a city inspector, who confirmed that everything was actually in compliance and that the complaints were frivolous. The harassment continued for weeks. My trash cans went missing, only to turn up in a drainage ditch 2 streets over. Someone kept putting flyers for anger management classes in my mailbox. I received dozens of spam calls and emails because my phone number and email address had been posted on Craigslist ads for free furniture and puppies. I documented everything, building a case file that was growing thicker by the day, but I still did not have definitive proof that it was Patricia. Until my security cameras caught her red-handed. It was 3 in the morning on a Tuesday in early December. My motion-activated cameras alerted my phone, and I pulled up the live feed to see Patricia, wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap, approaching my mailbox with something in her hand. I watched as she opened my mailbox and shoved something inside. I called 911 immediately, explaining that someone was tampering with my mail, which is a federal offense. Then I grabbed a flashlight and went outside, deliberately making noise. Patricia panicked when she saw me, dropped what she had been holding, and ran to her car parked around the corner, but she was not fast enough. I got clear footage of her face, and the police arrived within minutes to find her speeding away. They pulled her over 2 blocks from the neighborhood. What Patricia had put in my mailbox was a dead rat. She had also brought a bag containing a brick and another threatening note, presumably planning to throw the brick through one of my windows. The police found both items in her car, along with a notebook containing detailed logs of my daily activities, my work schedule, and lists of ways to make Jenkins leave. Patricia was arrested and charged with multiple crimes: harassment, stalking, criminal mischief for the vandalism, trespassing, and tampering with a mailbox. The dead rat and the stalking logs pushed the charges into more serious territory. The next morning, my phone would not stop ringing. Neighbors who had previously ignored the situation were calling to apologize and offer support. Douglas called to express the board's shock and to assure me that they would cooperate fully with the investigation. Even my insurance company called, saying they would review the previous claims in light of the arrest. Patricia made bail, but she was ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from me and my property. The HOA held another emergency meeting and voted to permanently remove her from the board and strip her of any authority in the organization. Several homeowners started circulating a petition to amend the HOA bylaws to add stronger protections against board member overreach and harassment. The case took several months to wind its way through the court system. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that she had been under stress and that my antagonistic behavior with the trash bins had provoked her. The prosecutor shut that down quickly, pointing out that even if I had been annoying, nothing I did justified stalking, vandalism, or putting a dead rat in my mailbox. In March, Patricia pleaded guilty to several charges as part of a plea deal. She was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, 18 months of probation, a substantial fine, and mandatory psychological counseling. She was also ordered to pay restitution for the damage to my property and my legal expenses, but the story does not quite end there. During the legal proceedings, more information came to light about Patricia's behavior. It turned out I was not her first target. Over her 5 years as HOA president, she had driven 3 other homeowners out of the neighborhood with similar harassment campaigns. One family had sold their house at a loss just to escape her. Another couple had gotten divorced, with the husband later saying the stress of Patricia's constant violations and fines had destroyed their marriage. Several of these former residents came forward once they heard about Patricia's arrest. They provided testimony and documentation of her behavior, which helped strengthen the criminal case against her. It also opened the HOA up to potential civil liability for failing to stop her abuse of power. The HOA board, now under Douglas's leadership, took immediate action to reform. They hired an independent management company to handle day-to-day operations and enforcement, taking that power away from board members. They revised dozens of outdated and overly restrictive rules, including the ridiculous trash bin timing requirements. The new rules simply stated that bins should be placed out no earlier than the evening before collection and removed within 24 hours after collection. Reasonable, flexible, and actually enforceable without harassment. They also established a formal appeal process for any homeowner who felt they had been unfairly cited or fined, with review by the full board rather than just the president. And they passed a rule requiring 2 board members to agree before any fine over $50 could be issued. As for me, I finally got my life back. I put my trash out Wednesday evenings like a normal person. I focused on my startup, which actually secured funding thanks to that successful demo I had given during the height of the conflict. I even started dating a woman named Michelle Parker, who lived a few streets over and had heard the whole saga from neighbors. She thought my malicious compliance with the 2 a.m. trash placement was hilarious. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal. Patricia's house went up for sale while she was in jail, and it sold to a young couple with twin toddlers who were absolutely delightful. The wife, Amanda, brought me cookies when they moved in and apologized on behalf of the entire neighborhood for what I had been through. Douglas turned out to be an excellent HOA president. He actually cared about making the neighborhood a good place to live rather than using his position as a power trip. Violations were handled with common sense and communication. The monthly HOA meetings became focused on actual community issues like organizing neighborhood events and maintaining common areas, rather than nitpicking about garbage can placement. One weird positive outcome was that the whole experience made me somewhat of a local celebrity in Austin area HOA reform circles. I was invited to speak at a city council meeting about HOA oversight and accountability. My testimony, along with that of Patricia's other victims, helped push forward a county ordinance requiring HOAs to register with the county and providing homeowners with stronger protection against harassment. I also started a blog documenting the entire experience, which went viral. I received messages from people all over the country dealing with similar HOA nightmares. Some wanted advice, some just wanted to vent, and some shared their own stories of malicious compliance and standing up to petty tyrants in positions of minor authority. The blog led to an unexpected opportunity. A production company reached out asking if they could option my story for a television show. I thought they were joking at first, but they were serious. We are still in early discussions, but apparently stories about HOA conflicts are surprisingly popular fodder for comedy dramas. Michelle finds the whole thing amusing. She was actually friendly with Patricia before all this happened, and says she had always sensed something off about her, but never imagined it would escalate to criminal behavior. Michelle told me that Patricia had been obsessed with maintaining a perfect image of the neighborhood, seeing it as a reflection of her own success and status. Anyone who did not conform to her vision of perfection was a threat that needed to be eliminated. Looking back now, almost a year after that first ridiculous warning about my trash bins, I can see how the entire situation was a perfect storm of petty bureaucracy, unchecked authority, and someone with serious control issues. If Patricia had just been reasonable from the start, none of this would have happened. If she had warned me nicely and worked with me to find a solution, I would have happily complied. But she chose confrontation and escalation at every turn. She chose to abuse her authority, to harass and stalk me, and ultimately to commit crimes. And that was entirely her choice, not mine. I do still feel a bit guilty about the 2 a.m. trash placement. I know it was petty and deliberately annoying. But at the time, it felt like the only way to stand up to an unjust system. When someone is going to punish you no matter what you do, sometimes the best response is to do exactly what they say you can do, taken to its logical extreme. The legal system ultimately worked, though it took time and money and stress that I would have rather avoided. Patricia faced consequences for her actions. The HOA reformed its practices, and I learned a lot about standing up for myself and not backing down when I know I am right. These days, I am active in the HOA as a regular member. I attend meetings, serve on the social committee, and even volunteer for neighborhood improvement projects. I want to be part of making sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else in Meadowbrook Hills. The neighborhood has genuinely become a great place to live. We have regular block parties, a community garden, and even a neighborhood watch program that is actually about watching out for real problems, not policing trash can placement times. Property values have gone up, and several people have told me that the HOA reforms were a major selling point when they bought their homes here. I still have all the documentation from the conflict stored in boxes in my garage, just in case, but I do not expect to need it again. The new management company is professional and fair. The board is responsive and reasonable, and everyone seems to have learned from the Patricia disaster that HOA leadership is supposed to be about serving the community, not ruling over it like a fiefdom. Sometimes late at night, when I am up working on my startup, I think about that first morning when I wheeled my trash bins out at 2 a.m., deliberately letting them rattle and bang. It was such a small act of defiance, but it set off a chain of events that changed everything. It forced the issue into the open, revealed Patricia's true nature, and ultimately led to positive changes for everyone. I would not recommend it as a general strategy for dealing with difficult HOA situations. Most of the time, communication and compromise are better approaches. But when you are dealing with someone who has no interest in being reasonable, sometimes you have to get creative. Sometimes you have to take them at their exact word and show them why their unreasonable rules create problems. And sometimes, just sometimes, you have to be willing to wake up at 2 in the morning to take out your trash, just to prove a point. Michelle jokes that she is dating the most famous trash rebel in Texas. My friends from college think the whole thing is hilarious and have made it into a running joke. One of them even got me a custom t-shirt that says, 2 a.m. Trash Warrior, as a birthday gift. My startup is doing well, and I have been able to hire 2 employees. We are working on project management software for remote teams, ironically named Compliance. The name came from a joking suggestion by Michelle, and it stuck. Our tagline is, "Following the rules should not drive you crazy." I bought a new truck last month, using some of the restitution money Patricia was ordered to pay. It is nothing fancy, just a reliable vehicle that I needed anyway, but there is something satisfying about the fact that her harassment ultimately funded it. The former homeowners who Patricia had driven out of the neighborhood have stayed in touch with me. One of them, a man named Kevin who sold his house at a loss to escape Patricia's constant harassment, told me that my case gave him closure. He had always felt like he had given up and let her win. Seeing her face actual consequences helped him let go of some of the anger he had been carrying for years. That conversation really stuck with me. Patricia's behavior had caused real, lasting harm to people. Broken marriages, financial losses, stress-related health problems. All because one person in a position of minor authority decided that her vision of a perfect neighborhood was more important than the well-being of the people who lived there. It made me think about how many other HOAs across the country might have their own Patricias. People who start out with good intentions, maybe, but who gradually become drunk on the small amount of power they have. Who lose sight of the fact that rules are supposed to serve people, not the other way around. The county ordinance that passed partly because of my testimony includes provisions for mediation services for homeowner HOA disputes before they escalate to legal action. It is not perfect, but it is a step in the right direction. Several other counties in Texas are considering similar measures. I gave another talk recently at a community college, speaking to a class about property law and HOA governance. The students were fascinated by the story, and several of them said it changed how they thought about HOAs. One student, a young woman planning to buy her first house, said she would now make sure to thoroughly research any HOA before purchasing a property under its jurisdiction. That is the real legacy of this whole mess, I think. Not the criminal case or the reforms in Meadowbrook Hills, but the awareness it raised. More people understanding their rights, reading their HOA covenants carefully, attending meetings and holding board members accountable. Patricia is scheduled to be released from jail in a few weeks. I do not know what she will do or where she will go. I do not particularly care, as long as she stays away from me and Meadowbrook Hills. The restraining order is still in effect, and I have alerts set up to notify me if she comes within the prohibited distance. Part of me wonders if she has learned anything from this experience. Does she understand how her behavior was wrong, how she hurt people? Or does she still see herself as the victim, persecuted for trying to maintain standards? I will probably never know, and that is okay. Her psychological state is not my concern or my responsibility. What I do know is that I am in a much better place now than I was a year ago. I have a thriving business, a wonderful girlfriend, and a genuine sense of community in my neighborhood. I stood up to a bully and won. The system, despite its flaws, ultimately worked, and I can put my trash out at a reasonable hour without fear of harassment, which is really all I wanted in the first place. Sometimes I drive past Patricia's old house, now occupied by the nice young couple with twins. There are toys in the yard, seasonal decorations on the porch, and a general sense of life and warmth that was never there when Patricia lived there. The house looks better, happier somehow. That is what a neighborhood should be. Not a museum of perfect houses and manicured lawns where no one dares step out of line, but a living community where people can actually live their lives without being terrorized by petty tyrants with clipboards. Michelle and I have been talking about getting a dog. A big, friendly golden retriever that will shed everywhere and track mud and be absolutely perfect. The HOA rules allow pets, of course. There are guidelines about barking and leash requirements, but they are reasonable guidelines enforced with common sense. I never thought I would say this, but I am actually glad I moved to Meadowbrook Hills. Not because of the house or the location, but because of what I learned about standing up for myself, about the importance of documentation and persistence, about how small acts of resistance can lead to bigger changes, and about how sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is follow the rules exactly as written, even if it means taking out your trash at 2 in the morning. The story has made me somewhat cautious about HOAs in general, but it has also shown me that they can work when run by reasonable people. Douglas and the current board have proven that. They have shown that an HOA can actually serve its intended purpose, maintaining property values and community standards without making homeowners' lives miserable. I got a message last week from someone in Oregon who read my blog. Their HOA president was pulling similar stunts, and my story had inspired them to fight back. They documented everything, built a case, and presented it to their board. The president was removed just like Patricia. That felt good, knowing that sharing my experience might help others. The television production company is moving forward with the option. They want to fictionalize it, of course, change names and details, but keep the core story intact. It is surreal to think that my battle over garbage cans might become entertainment for millions of people. But if it raises awareness about HOA issues and makes people think twice about abusing positions of authority, I am all for it. I have been working with a screenwriter on the project, and she keeps asking me questions about my emotional state during various parts of the ordeal. How did it feel when Patricia first warned me, when I got the fines, when I decided to start the 2 a.m. trash routine, when I discovered the trespassing? When she was arrested, answering those questions has been cathartic in a way. It has forced me to process the whole experience and understand how much it affected me. I was angrier than I realized at the time, more stressed, more anxious. I lost sleep, not just from waking up at 2 a.m., but from worry and frustration. But I also felt empowered, especially after I started the malicious compliance. There was something deeply satisfying about turning Patricia's own rules against her, about exposing the absurdity of the system she had created. Every time I wheeled those bins out at 2 a.m., I felt like I was taking back control. Michelle has been incredibly supportive through all of this. She listens when I need to vent, she celebrates the victories with me, and she helps keep me grounded. She reminds me that most people are reasonable, that Patricia was an outlier, and that I should not let one bad experience poison my view of community living. We have been dating for 8 months now, and things are getting serious. She has started keeping some clothes at my place, and I have a drawer at hers. We have talked about moving in together eventually, maybe buying a bigger house somewhere in the neighborhood. The thought of going through another home purchase, an HOA process, makes me a little nervous, but having gone through this experience, I know what questions to ask and what red flags to watch for. The startup is growing faster than I expected. We landed a major client last month, a company with over 500 remote employees who needed better project management tools. The irony of my compliance-themed software succeeding partly because of my very public compliance battle is not lost on me. I hired a marketing person who wants to lean into the story, use it as part of our brand identity. I am hesitant about that. I do not want to be known forever as the trash guy. But she makes a good point that authenticity matters in business, and that my story of standing up to unreasonable authority resonates with a lot of people who deal with corporate bureaucracy every day. We compromised. The company website has an About page that mentions my experience with navigating complex rule systems without going into detail. It is there for people who know the story, but it does not dominate our messaging. Life has settled into a comfortable rhythm. I work during the day, spend evenings with Michelle, attend the occasional HOA meeting or neighborhood event, and take my trash out on Wednesday evenings like a normal person. It is the ordinary, peaceful life I wanted when I first moved to Meadowbrook Hills. But I have not forgotten the lessons of that conflict. I stay aware, I document things when necessary, and I do not let anyone push me around just because they have a title or position of authority. I have learned that standing up for yourself is not about being combative or difficult. It is about knowing your rights, being willing to defend them, and not backing down when you are right. I also learned that sometimes the system works. It took time and effort, but Patricia faced consequences. The HOA reformed. Justice, in its slow and imperfect way, prevailed. That has actually restored some of my faith in institutions, in the idea that positive change is possible even when things seem hopeless. Next month is the anniversary of Patricia's arrest. The neighborhood is planning a community picnic, and Douglas jokingly suggested we should have it at 2 in the morning as a tribute. I laughed, but I am not quite ready to make jokes about that yet. Maybe someday. For now, I am content to live my life, grow my business, and enjoy my relationship with Michelle. The whole trash bin saga has become just another story in my past, albeit a dramatic one. It does not define me, but it did shape me. It taught me about resilience, about standing up for what is right, and about the importance of community. And on Wednesday evenings, when I wheel my trash bins out to the curb at a normal hour like a normal person, I cannot help but smile a little. Because I know that I could put them out at 2 a.m. if I wanted to. I have proven that. But I do not need to anymore. That victory is enough.